You're listening to Nutrition Matters podcast with Paige Smathers, registered dietitian nutritionist. Nutrition Matters podcast explores how to approach food and your body in a whole new way. I interview people who share stories and expertise in rejecting diet culture, making peace with food, and discovering a more positive, realistic, and sustainable approach to health and well-being. I'm Paige Smathers, registered dietitian nutritionist, and owner of Positive Nutrition, an in-person nutrition therapy practice in Salt Lake City, Utah. I offer free resources, including this podcast, a blog, and posts on social media. If you're local to Salt Lake City, check out our services and availability for appointments, and keep your eyes out for in-person groups on mindfulness, intuitive eating, body image resilience, and more. Go to positive-nutrition.com and hit subscribe if you'd like to keep in touch. I also offer online courses covering topics like the science of nutrition, mindfulness, and healing your relationship with food. Check those out at positive-nutrition.com/academy. If you like what you hear on the podcast, you can make a difference by leaving a review, sharing with friends and family, or making a donation. Thank you so much for your support. You can also find me on Instagram or Facebook if you'd like to have a little more food for thought at Paige Smathers RD. Thank you so much for listening. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Nutrition Matters podcast, and thanks so much for being here. My name is Paige, and I'm your host, and I'm really pumped to bring you this conversation I had with Emily Fonsbeck. If you're not already familiar with her, we talk about it a little bit in this podcast episode, but Emily's been on the podcast a few times in the past. She is a wealth of knowledge about so many great topics. Some of the things that she's most well known for are her great conversations on podcasts and also her own blog and also just media interviews. She's even been in books talking about orthorexia. So she brings such a just calm and gentle and reasonable voice in this space of intuitive eating and making peace with food. I love her voice. I love the way that she approaches this stuff, and she's just one of my faves. So that's why she's been on the podcast so much. But today I actually brought her on to talk about this really interesting intersection that, for anyone who's in Utah, you'll understand why this is important. But for those of you who maybe don't know much about the LDS church, you might be kind of like, what's this all about? We're talking about the intersection of food and body image struggles for those who serve LDS missions. So for those of you who are unaware, Utah is sort of central location for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. You might know them as Mormons. You also might know it as the LDS Church. We have a high percentage of practicing members here in our state. And with that brings, for me personally, it brings a lot of kind of reason to sort of explore unique cultural elements to this particular part of the world and also just this particular cultural or religious background. So when young men or young women are around ages like 18 to 20-ish, they can decide whether or not they would like to go on a mission. And so they are assigned to a particular place in the world, and they leave their family and friends for anywhere from 18 months to 2 years, and they live and work and serve and teach and do all kinds of things in, potentially completely foreign country, learning a new language, etc. So with that unique element to this religious background comes some kind of unique cultural challenges around body image and food and pressure and all this stuff that can kind of come up. So that's what we're discussing today. This is really important for me because I actually have many clients in my nutrition therapy practice who have come home from missions and who have struggled on missions, or maybe whose eating disorders are sort of, they rear their ugly heads on missions for a variety of reasons. And again, this isn't just to say that missions are terrible or anything like that. It's just to say there's some unique pressures and unique moments or reasons why this moment in a person's life can be really difficult. So My motivation in recording this podcast is hopefully to have a resource for those of you who listen and who this resonates. Maybe if you know someone who is involved with mission leadership, or even if you know someone who is going to go on a mission and you'd like to give them a resource of something they can kind of assess and look at before their mission in terms of their own relationship with food and body, that would just be really cool to me to be a part of, hopefully a little bit of a solution to a time that can be really tough for people. The other reason that I hope helps people here is just, if you are unfamiliar with all of this stuff, if this is all kind of like a foreign language to you, I just invite you to tune in anyway, because maybe you'll learn something and maybe it'll be interesting for you just on a educational level to understand more about this religious background and this cultural sort of practice of going on a mission, and just to kind of understand people, humans better. I know for me, I love learning about different ways that people live and different cultural practices, different beliefs, different just things that make humans tick. I always find that really fascinating. So if you're here for that, you are welcome to be here as well. And then other than that, I always just like to remind everybody that if this stuff resonates and if you want to learn more, there are all kinds of resources available to you. This podcast, I also have a blog that's at positive-nutrition.com. Lots of great resources there. The Positive Nutrition Academy is a great way to get a little bit, next level training on some of this stuff. So there's online courses and webinars available there. That's just positive-nutrition.com/academy. And then, of course, if you are local to Salt Lake City, and if this stuff resonates, if you realize you need some help, that's where my practice is located, and you are more than welcome to check out availability at positive-nutrition.com/appointments. And then also, if you are local to Emily, she lives in Cache Valley area in Utah. Also check out her services. She is a really phenomenal dietitian. And if this stuff resonates, if you feel like you need some help with this stuff, Emily is a great resource as well. Okay, thanks for joining me, and here we go. Hi, Emily. Welcome to Nutrition Matters Podcast.
Thank you for having me. Again, it's like coming home.
Oh, that's so sweet. What is this, the third or fourth time you've come on,
I
probably?
don't know, a few. It's like you were my first podcast interview ever.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, totally. You're the OG around here. Like
Oh,
you're one of the
wow.
original podcasters for sure.
Oh, it's quite the title, be an OG podcaster. I love it.
Mm.
Well, so Emily, let's just, if anyone hasn't heard our podcast together or isn't familiar with you and your work, just take a minute to talk about what you do and where you are, and anything that you think is relevant to the conversation for today.
For sure. So I am a registered dietitian in private practice. I own my own private practice. I'm located in Cache Valley, Utah, up very north, right close to Idaho border. And we just recently moved here about a little over a year ago, and love it. And I work with eating disorders, disordered eating, and body image concerns. And of course, all the stuff that comes with that, like digestive concerns and using intuitive eating principles and whatnot. And I have 4 kids and a husband, and here we are in Cache Valley.
Yay! And your kids are so cute, and you have such great things to say about parenting and feeding kids, and I love it. You're a lot of fun to follow along with your life and your expertise. So
Thank you.
yeah, you're welcome. Okay, so Emily, we want to talk about a topic that both of us as Utah-based dietitians, and also just in general, we feel like this is a really important topic to cover. This topic of the LDS Church, or the Mormon Church, or the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Those are 3 different ways of saying the same thing, just in case anyone isn't familiar with those different terms. So what we wish every missionary of the LDS Church knew about food, nutrition, and body image before serving missions. So let's quickly take a little bit of a zoomed out look and talk about what are missions, what's it like culturally around missions when it comes to just in general, like the pressure or the, what it is, but plus also how that might intersect with food or body image or mental health or things like that. So that's a big question, but just take a stab at it and we'll explore it.
Yeah, yeah. So, first, I will say I'm an active member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So, this is a topic I've thought a lot about, and I really appreciate you, Paige, inviting me to share some thoughts on this and just start this conversation and hopefully something that we can keep going. So, there are a few different types of missions for those who choose to serve within the church. There are church service missions and temple missions, humanitarian service missions. But the most common type of mission, and the one that is most often referred to, and I'd imagine the one that we'll focus mostly on here, is a proselyting mission. So young men are eligible for mission service at age 18 and young women at 19. Young men serve for 2 years and young women serve for 18 months. And I mean, let's just think about that. So 18 and 19. I mean, this age is a particularly tricky time for food or body image in general, in my mind. I think even if someone at this age isn't transitioning into mission service, they have, oh, we hear this all the time, right? The pressure of avoiding the freshman 15 or just transitioning from high school to possible college. And all that brings, or just transition in life in general. And what we know about life transitions is that they're a vulnerable time in anyone's life, no matter our age, right? So graduating high school and moving on to the next season of life is really tough for anyone. And of course, specifically here, mission life isn't easy either. So there can be added pressure there. In fact, I found a sample day in the life of a missionary. Do you want me to share it? Maybe just to give like an idea
Yeah,
of
please
what that's
do.
like.
That's helpful so that people understand in context of what we'll talk about, just kind of what the mission is like in general for missionaries.
Yeah, so this is a sample. Of course, it could be variable because missionaries serve all over. I mean, it's a international church, so they're everywhere.
Well, and we
And so
should also
depend.
say here, Emily, if you're listening in wherever you happen to be, if you've seen young men or young women walking the streets dressed in either white shirts and ties or women wearing skirts and just kind of being clean cut and smiley and willing to talk with you and just friendly, kind people. You've probably seen someone like that where you live. Maybe they're riding bikes, maybe they're walking. You've probably interacted with a missionary or two in your life, regardless of where you are in the world. I'd say that's fairly safe to say, would you?
Yeah, probably. Yeah, they're like the ones with the name tags. Maybe they've knocked on your door.
Yeah.
You've seen them. Yeah, totally. So around 6:30 they wake up. They're encouraged to pray, exercise, and do any other preparation for the day. I have an hour for that. 7:30 is breakfast. 8 o'clock is personal study, like from like their missionary manual or certain scriptures or whatnot. 9 a.m. is companion study, and they all missionaries have a companion, like stuff like Paige just said. You have a companion. They go two by two. You've seen them together with other people, and they study with their companion, prepare to teach, confirm plans for the day, and then they do a language study if they're learning a foreign language. Um, and then they begin proselyting. So they teach and find people to teach or have teaching appointments. And then that's basically what they do all day. They have maybe lunch and dinner breaks, maybe with people or on their own. And then usually around 9 or 9:30, they're back in their apartment or their living space and get ready for the next day activities. And then they go to bed. Like it's a pretty structured day. There's not a lot of wiggle room. And of course, there's going to be differences in that. So for example, I saw this example of someone who served in the Argentina mission where they started proselyting at 9 a.m. and then they had companion study at the time that everyone else in the country was taking a siesta. So obviously there's going to be cultural differences, but hopefully that gives you a good idea of the jam-packed day that these missionaries have.
Yeah. And an important thing I wanted to pull from there is depending on where the mission is, but especially in the US, I'd say, maybe is a safe thing to say. The culture around members having missionary, like members of the church having missionaries over for dinner. Like there, people will like kind of sign up, like, oh, I'll have them over on Tuesday night and you'll have them over on Wednesday. And so feeding the missionaries is a big part of kind of what the just regular members tend to do. But
Mhm.
there's also a lot of pressure around the missionaries, kind of performing when it comes to just like they're young and they're moving around all day. And so there's just this pressure around eat, 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 eat. And depending on where they are in the world, that also might be even more intense, cultural, given like cultural differences around food. So do you want to just kind of mention that or add anything else on to what I've already said there?
That's a really interesting um, subject you bring up about, eating and cultural norms that might surround that. And then, of course, just like I want to be pleasing to the people who have offered to serve me dinner or lunch or whatever it might be. And full disclosure, I have not served a mission, but my husband did. He served for 2 years in Seoul, Korea. And I mentioned that I was doing this interview with you, and he said, one thing he mentioned around food was he quickly learned that in the Korean culture you eat everything that's on your plate. So if you don't want to eat everything on your plate, then don't put it on your plate. Otherwise, you need to make sure your plate is clean. And so he learned to take less than what he thought he might want, so he didn't offend anyone, and then go back for more if he did want it. So it may just come down to kind of learning the cultural norms and how to still stay true to yourself while also not offending other people of other cultures. I know for me, like if I traveled to another country, I wouldn't want to offend them even if I was a missionary or not. This just gets tricky anytime, when we're mixing cultures and
Definitely.
ethnicities and different, traditions. So that's just one example of how a missionary might want to think about that, ways that they can stay true to themselves, but also not offend those people that they're with, especially when they're really trying to love and serve these people in that area.
Yeah, I love it. And sometimes that food element can just be tricky because you're trying to fit in, you're trying to build relationships and have fun together and have it be lighthearted. But sometimes there's some elements of not, and you're only 18 or 19, right? So it's like, how do
Yes.
you're not experienced with setting boundaries or like being assertive, but also finding that balance of kind of meeting your own needs. I mean, that's tricky no matter who you are, right?
Yes, absolutely.
But maybe
Yeah.
magnified on a mission where there's that kind of extra, I need to represent my church, I need to
Mhm.
perform, I need to be the best version of myself possible, right? There's a lot of that going on too.
Absolutely. And maybe that's just a good topic to discuss about this pressure of, in general, having it all together. And also, yes, sure, like, wanting to maybe put your best foot forward, but also recognizing that none of us are perfect. None of us are. We're not going to always do things perfectly. And I don't know that we should hold missionaries to a higher standard than anyone else, of course. There's certain expectations. I get that on a mission, and also hopefully anyone in general can still practice self-compassion with themselves in that scenario.
Yeah, for sure. So tell us more about what you've noticed or what you've picked up on around just the sort of general pressure around a mission. And I don't mean that in a negative way necessarily. I'm sure there are negative ways that that plays out for people, but just culturally, what's it like? What's it like to be on a mission? What's it like to, um, yeah, to be in that situation? And is there pressure, and what does that look like?
I love this question, and it's something that I really do appreciate the opportunity to explore. It's something I've thought a lot about as I have children of my own, particularly a 14-year-old boy who is 4 years away of being eligible for serving a mission. And I agree, I don't want this to feel negative, but I do want to offer some thoughts of things that have come to my mind as I've thought about this. Um, I think the first thing that I really, we are active members of the church, so we do teach the gospel in our home. But part of church doctrine is agency. It's a huge part of church doctrine, right? That we are not I want to preserve my children's agency. They were sent to earth with their own ability to choose. And I think a lot of times the way we talk about missions is it can easily become, I went on a mission so I didn't embarrass my parents. I went on a mission so that I did what I was supposed to do, and no one, questioned if I was worthy or if, why I wasn't going. And it can just become a really awkward time in someone's life. Those ages between 18 to 21 can feel awkward. Everyone's like waiting around for them to say they're going or whatnot. And the way that we talk about it in our home is, of course, my husband and I don't necessarily hide our feelings about encouraging our children to serve missions, only because we think there's a lot of value in how they will grow physically and emotionally and mentally and spiritually by devoting a couple of years of life to loving and serving other people. I don't see a downside to that. And so we don't necessarily hide those feelings, but always that comes with the disclaimer of you should only go if you want to go. This has to be your choice, because as you read through that day, we kind of talked about that day and the commitment that they're making, it's probably not wise for them to go and be like, wait, I didn't choose this. I went because my parents wanted me to, or I was afraid of embarrassing them, or of not doing what I was supposed to do. I don't actually want to be here. I don't actually want to be doing this. You can imagine how difficult that might be. And so I think, preserving agency in this way is going to be really important to their experience on a mission if they choose to go. The other thing that I've thought quite a bit about is the fact that these kids, these young men and young women, are eligible for a mission at 18 or 19. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're prepared for a mission at 18 or 19. They're only eligible. We know that missions are going to be physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually rigorous, and they need to be prepared in all those areas. And so, I don't know, maybe I'm speaking to parents more, and really honestly, any listener thinking about a mission, I would just think about that. I'm eligible, but am I ready? And it's okay to be eligible for a mission and not quite ready yet, even if you want to serve. And I would suggest thinking about ways and preparing yourself in all of those areas before mission service, I guess is what I'm getting at.
Yeah, I like that. Definitely. So there is a lot of cultural pressure around, like you were saying, like, will I disappoint my family, or what will people think of me? Because it is seen as sort of almost like a rite of passage, would you say?
Yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah, totally.
And so, and questions might be sort of circulating in people's minds if you put it off or if you wait. And so there's some pressure around, I need to do what's expected of me. And I get that for sure. But I love what you're saying about like really trying to be honest with yourself. Like, am I ready in these different ways? And can I do what I need to do to be as mentally, physically, emotionally well and strong as possible in order to like have the best experience possible?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Okay, so I just want to quickly share why this is so important for me and why I reached out to you to talk about this. So, my practice is in Salt Lake City, Utah. Now, a lot of people think when they think of Utah, they think everybody here are members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And yes, we do have a large population, a significant percentage of population who are active members. It's not everybody. However, Mike, I care so much about this cohort of people, of young people who I see them in my office one-on-one. There are so many people who have fabulous experiences on missions. There are stories and experiences of people who, really end up struggling significantly. And sometimes the way that someone struggles has to do with food and body image, and or maybe really well-intentioned leaders or people involved in the mission who might not have really known what to say or how to support or how to work with someone who's having these issues. So my hope in exploring this with you today, Emily, is I hope that this can be a resource for future missionaries, for missionaries who have served before but kind of want to make sense of what the heck happened when it comes to food and body image during those years, or perhaps even leadership, a resource for those who might be overseeing the missionaries, how they might be able to navigate conversations with those who come to them who are really struggling. Or so that's sort of my big lofty goal here, is to just to provide a place where people can hopefully make some sense of what this experience is like as we intersect sort of this time of life that's really potentially tricky when it comes to food and body image, but then also when you add on this time of life that many people choose to serve missions, and just what that might mean in terms of how that intersects with our relationship with food. So what else would you add, Emily?
I love it. I think that really a glaringly obvious situation is the fact that, these kids are 18 or 19 and body changes are still happening, right? Like, we're not done growing at 18 or 19. I wasn't, I mean, I'm different than I was at 18. I'm sure you are too, Paige. I think this is just a time when we really are still growing and developing. And of course, bodies change many times during our life. And your goal of offering a place to talk about this in for wherever you are, whether it's someone preparing for a mission or thinking about a mission, someone who has returned from a mission is wanting to make sense of where what happened and what went on, and make sense of like food and body image, particularly at that time. And then, of course, maybe parents who are thinking, okay, I get the culture that we live in. Like, the Mormon culture is I think very different than like the doctrines of the church. It can be difficult to navigate. And so I'm a parent and I'm trying to navigate that. I think that there's just a lot of layers to this, and there's a lot of people that are affected by these issues, and a lot of people who love these 18 and 19-year-olds and want to see them survive and thrive, and in whether they go on a mission or not. And so I think it's important to acknowledge that food and body image issues are going to be natural at this age. And so what we need to do, if these kids are entering a really high pressure situation, we need to make sure that they're well prepared and that they understand what's going on, or that they can look back and make sense of it.
Yeah, for sure. I love that. Okay, so let's set the stage a tiny bit about what it's like to prepare to leave, what's going on in just sort of the consciousness of a missionary who's like, okay, I've gotten my mission call, I know where I'm headed, I'm going to be gone for a year and a half or 2 years, and there's like this, just like, okay, so this is really something most people relate to, just like there's pressure about the freshman 15, which you've already talked about, Emily. There's also sort of this general conversation that happens around missions that's like, well, you got to watch out because on your mission you gain a lot of weight. Would you agree, or would you add anything else to that?
Yeah, completely. I think that there is this pressure of like coming back and looking the same, like coming back and looking the same as you did 2 years before. And of course, you're not going to, right? Because regardless of what you ate or what you did or didn't do on your mission, all of us change, from the age of 18 to 20, or 19 to 21. So I think that there's a couple of things there. I actually have a nephew serving a mission in the South right now, and I actually really enjoy reading his emails that he sends. And one, I noticed just one kind of side note he had mentioned, which was, he's in the South. They're known for their heavy fried foods, right? And he'd even mentioned this after eating at a member's home. And he said something like, it's just a good thing that I'm running and doing push-ups every day. And of course that caught my eye. I'd imagine that most anyone else could read that and be like, well, yeah, that's normal. That's how people talk. I mean, that's just our culture at large, right? This isn't just affecting missionaries. This is all of us. Diet culture is in every fabric of our conversations. And I noticed this come up as he mentioned this. And I think it's a good example to highlight here. Not to say anything about him. He's a great young man. But that's a good example of this, even the subtle pressure that might be happening of, okay, I'm on this mission and I need to make sure that I come home still looking good, quote unquote, right?
Yeah, and we need to think about the fact that especially like so boys potentially could be leaving straight after high school, right? So
Mm-hmm.
let's just talk in generalities here. Let's say you're, on the football team and you play soccer and you're like go go go, super active kid, loving life, and then your lifestyle drastically changes as you are in a new place, you are eating different food, you are have a different activity level. And so not only that, but then you're also transitioning from, a child to an adult. And so
Mm-hmm.
all of that being said, this sort of just general narrative of like you should look the same after you finish as you do when you start, it's something that I just want us to all take a minute and just pause and be like, wait a minute, does that even make sense? And even if it does make sense, what does that do on a behavioral or a mental health level for these I don't know what to call them, kids or young adults, you know? They're a little
Mm-hmm.
bit of both, probably.
Yeah.
So yeah. What would you say about that? Like that idea of questioning how we talk about this fear of weight gain during a mission.
Well, it's interesting because I think in general, I know you see this two-page. I think we can absolutely surmise this, that believing that your body shouldn't change creates suffering for anyone of any age. This can happen for, a girl going through puberty. It can happen for, young adults or kids leaving home for 2 years to serve a church mission. It can happen for, postpartum women and just all of us as we age. It's just the general idea that if we believe that our bodies should not change, that will always cause suffering. It will always cause shame. It will always cause, um, it will make us feel like our bodies, there's something wrong, that we're doing something wrong, that we need to fix the situation. And what we need to learn how to do is embrace this reality that bodies do change and not create an expectation that bodies shouldn't change. And so I think what we're saying is kind of putting a call out to in general to not put the pressure on these young people to come back looking the same, because they won't. That's not really normal. It's not the way that we're meant to, it's not how our bodies work, I guess, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I love that. That's so beautifully said. And that makes me think of when I run in-person groups and this type of concept comes up around bodies changing. I've had some beautiful discussions with group members who have said something along the lines of, well, I want to be changing right now. I embrace the fact that my mind is opening to developing a more healthy relationship with food, and that's a beautiful thing. And I'm so glad that my mind at age 35 isn't the same that it was at age 20, they might say. But why do I expect my mind to change or my beliefs to deepen and become more meaningful? But why would I hope that my body doesn't change too? Like that doesn't make sense, that we embrace it in one arena but we reject it in another.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, I
So
love
good.
that too. So yeah, so creating more of a culture of like maybe even just a little bit of informed consent, like, like not to be
Hmm.
surprised when your body does change in that time of life or in that new setting that you find yourself in. Just sort of talking about it. Hopefully, if we could culturally shift to like, yeah, bodies change on missions. Like, isn't that great? Just kind of like we're trying to have those types of conversations around puberty, or around menopause, or around pregnancy or postpartum. I
Hmm.
just think that could be really positive to just expect that rather than to be so surprised by it.
Exactly. And I think this, as you were talking, I started thinking about what we know to be true about internalized weight bias or weight stigma in general. And the fact that typically what we associate with changes in body shape or definitely an increase in fat on the body is things like laziness or lack of willpower or self discipline or any number of things, maybe even stupid, perhaps, right? There's a lot of words that often are associated with changes in body shape, like, oh, they've let themselves go. And I think that this could easily be what's happening here. Like, I need to go home and I need to still look the same because if my body changes, I might run the risk of people assuming that I wasn't disciplined on my mission, that I wasn't successful, quote unquote, as a missionary because I didn't come home in the same, size body that I left in. It could easily become that, just the fear of the judgment that might come of their ability as a missionary or their success as a missionary because of the changes in size. And this, of course, is not just affecting missionaries. This is like a broader cultural issue that, good grief, I would love to see change. And I think, good people like you and your podcast are trying to do that. But I think that this is absolutely, I'd imagine what's happening here is what's often, creating that pressure is I'm going to be judged because of my body changing. Maybe this is a subconsciously, maybe it's not someone actually thinking that, like, oh, I need to keep my body the same size so people think I'm a good missionary. I don't know if it's as automatic in thought as that. I think it's often maybe more subconscious just because of the culture we live in.
Yeah, that's such a great point, and you're right. Like anyone can relate to this, whether you have anything to do with what we're talking about here or just more broadly. Like for example, when I would teach nutrition lessons in the inpatient or residential substance use disorder setting, so many people just feared what it would feel like to go home after spending months in treatment and seeing their family, and there was just so much fear around what if I look bigger, or what if I look different than when I went in. And it's such a sad thing because it's like, of course you will. Like, look at what you were doing before you came in, and look at how much healthier you are now. Like that's okay. Anyway, it's something I think we all can relate to, that angst of not seeing people for a while and then seeing them again and fearing sort of the judgment or the kind of look of like, oh, have you let yourself go? Or do you even care? Or what did you even do on your mission? Like that's a real thing.
Definitely. And so let's maybe talk about like what's the intervention there, right? Because we know that this is the reality. So how do we prevent that? Like what is the intervention? How do we how do we help our young adults not go through that? And I think so much of it is helping them, and I maybe speaking to parents and maybe just speaking to missionaries. Like this is part I think of missionary service is to start um, separating your worth and value from your appearance. And obviously, as we've mentioned, this is a larger cultural issue, of course. But I think we can cultivate some resilience this way by remembering that a successful quote unquote missionary doesn't come in a certain size, right? That your worth and value or your success, or, and I keep using the word success, I think that's a very relative term. So hopefully that's being taken in context. But worth and value is not dependent on appearance. And I think we need to make sure that we're raising kids that know that. And I don't think it's ever too late to start raising kids or to start sending those messages to our kids, no matter how old we are or they are, that their worth and value is not dependent on their appearance. That even though other people might judge them based on their appearance, they don't have to judge themselves. And this is where it matters. Like, how are we communicating this issue to ourselves? Obviously, the culture needs to change, and that would be nice, but I don't know that we're going to be able to escape the judgment or escape the comments or escape the diet and weight talk. But what we can do is cultivate resiliency within. I think that that comes with a healthy dose of self-compassion, and I definitely think it's this constant reminder that my worth and value is not dependent on my appearance. I am not here to be pretty. I'm not here to be a certain size. I'm here to be a person with thoughts and feelings and goals and endless potential. And I don't need to be bogged down by my appearance.
Yeah, Emily, that was my next question because, what I wanted to kind of explore is what if someone's listening to this and they're like, okay, I can get on board with this for myself. And I really believe it. It resonates. It feels good in my heart. But then there's the fact that you have to face people in your life, potentially your parents or your community members, or maybe even like, let's say, a mission president or a mission companion or whoever who's like,
Mm-hmm.
who isn't on board with this. And I think for a lot of people, it becomes very difficult to kind of navigate, how do I take this from being kind of my own thing into like maintaining that sense of I'm okay, I'm validating myself, I'm supporting myself even when I can see or people are actually commenting and judging me for my body. That's such a tricky thing to do.
It is. It is. And I think that there's, always a few options, and it probably depends. Maybe it depends on the situation, like it's a game time decision, how you want to handle it. And maybe it depends on, person to person and how they would want to navigate it. But I would love to offer just a few suggestions and things to think about and possibilities for how to navigate just food and weight talk in this area. I think the first is perhaps it is appropriate to set a verbal boundary. Like if you have family members that are making these comments a lot, maybe a verbal boundary is nice. Like that is really hurtful to me. Or, I'm really trying to avoid thinking of myself in those ways. I want to create a healthier relationship with food in my body. I don't know whatever resonates for you, but I think a verbal boundary is always an option. Sometimes we don't think it is, right? Because we're so worried about what other people think or how I might make other people feel. But I think at some point in time, how we feel or what we think has to become a priority over what other people think or however other people feel. We need to make sure that we're taking care of ourselves so that we can really take care of ourselves, be, our own supporter in that way.
Yeah,
So,
I
so
love
verbal
that.
boundaries. Yeah.
And the verbal boundary idea of like, I love Brene Brown's perspective on boundaries, that it's actually like a really loving, compassionate thing to do. It's saying, I know you love me and I want to help you love me best. And so I'm going to kind of tell you what I need from you rather than this kind. I think typically socially, what we do as human beings is we kind of like dance around and we're like, okay, I'm going to experiment with this. Oh, that didn't go over well. Okay, I shouldn't do that with this person. And how helpful is it to just have someone to be like, hey, here's what I need from you. Or like, gosh, when you say that doesn't really help support me in my health and well-being. It's not easy to hear that for sure, but it's kind of a breath of fresh air that you don't have to keep guessing, right?
Love it. Yes, you said that so well. Like instead of keeping the people guessing who really do probably want to love and support you, just tell them, right? And you might. I think that there's a difference of like blaming it on them instead of just like speaking from your heart and letting yourself be vulnerable and say, this is something that really matters to me and something that does feel hurtful. And I know you don't want to do that. I know that's not what you're intending. And so, let's talk about how to best handle it. I love it.
Okay, that's so great. Is there anything else you wanted to say in that kind of
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
So the other thing here is what we know about food and body image issues is they tend to be this comes from Tammy Beasley. I will totally give her credit. I love how she explains this. She's a dietitian, registered dietitian that works in this field of eating disorders. And the way that she describes this is food and body image are external buckets for our internal shame. And so when we're struggling with food and body, it tends to be the way that we're controlling what is internal shame. And so engaging in disordered eating or body image issues, it just perpetuates the very shame that caused them. And the antidote, always antidote to that internal shame is self-compassion. And so it's very easy to hear these comments from other people and have that trigger that shame and and have it trigger you to want to use disordered eating, to want to restrict, to maybe even binge and purge, depending. And I think we'll talk about maybe some of those behaviors a little bit more. But maybe it makes you want to use some behaviors, and maybe you wouldn't even necessarily classify as an eating disorder, but just disordered eating behaviors in general. It may trigger you to want to use those. It may make you want to manipulate your body or to fixate on your appearance or try to fix it. And what we have to remember is that's just the external control mechanism for what's happening inside. And the best way to address that internal shame is with self-compassion. And so I think it's important to remember that other people can comment, but really the thing that matters the most is how you're talking to yourself. That's how you work with that internal shame. That's how you neutralize that internal shame, is through self-compassion. And Kristen Neff is like, the Brene Brown of self-compassion. She is to self-compassion what Brene Brown is to shame, right? And the way that she describes this, and I love how she says this, I have found it incredibly helpful for me, is in self-compassion in its simplest form is, I'm human, I'm struggling, what do I need in this moment? To really validate that, like, yeah, that comment hurt me. And I don't have to just like, well, I guess I need to change. I guess I need to control this. I guess something needs to happen. Instead, it is like, that hurt me. And validate that comment did not feel good. And sure, you could externally process with that person. You could verbally, set some boundaries. And if that's not an option, you still have the option of validating that for yourself. Validating that, yeah, I did not like what I just heard. That really made me feel awkward and uncomfortable, and I'm not okay with that. And just the pure ability to validate that for yourself and to extend self-compassion into yourself in that moment will make all the difference to your possible shame that comes up with this food and body image stuff.
I love it, Emily, so much. And it's making me kind of think that, I wanted to spend some time talking about mission leadership. And well, and for those who don't know, every like geographical region is called a mission, and then in that mission there's leadership people in there, and there's like a mission president and mission president's wife, and they are kind of like the mom and dad of all those, right? All
Uh-huh.
those
That's a good
18
way to say
to
it. Yeah.
21 year olds.
Mhm.
Um, and so, as you're talking about this beautiful concept of self-compassion and allowing yourself to acknowledge, like, yeah, that really hurt, and that was painful, and that was difficult, or I'm having a difficult time, and what do I need right now, and how can I meet my needs, how can I take care of myself? I wonder how much of what you just said would you also kind of explain as your advice for how mission presidents can kind of be a safe landing place for people who end up reporting, yeah, I'm really struggling with food, or I'm really struggling with my body image.
Yeah, I think to validate their concerns, I think that is the not to take those concerns seriously is what I would say. That would be my plea to mission leadership, is to make sure that they're taking those concerns seriously. I think that I think that food and body image concerns are common, but they're not normal. And I think sometimes that can get flipped. Like, well, yeah, people struggle with food and body image. It's normal. It's not normal, it's common. It doesn't necessarily mean it's normal, and it doesn't necessarily mean that it's not serious. Disordered eating and body image issues, we know, comes on a spectrum, and any part of that spectrum is serious. And so I love that. I love that invitation to just say, what do I wish that mission leadership knew? And I think that is it. If they see their missionaries struggling with food and body image, to be sensitive to that, to recognize, like, tell me more about that. I want to learn from you what this is like, and how to best support you. And I would say that often these kinds of issues do need professional help. professional intervention. Food and body image situations is less about like, well, just eat and don't worry about it, or we'll just, focus more on scriptures and less on your body. That's not really an intervention, particularly for people who are struggling with these concerns. In all reality, eating disorders are mental illnesses. And so if someone is using eating disorder behaviors, it's going to need a much deeper level of intervention often than what typically happens. And so I think that's what I would say, and hopefully that's comprehensive enough, which is be sensitive to it, listen to them, learn from them, understand what they're going through, and then hopefully get them the right kind of help.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, because there's so many ways that it could kind of be problematic without anyone intending, right? So
Hmm.
just I would say my advice would be to avoid particular nutrition advice, especially if someone's coming to you with concerns
Hmm.
of, I've gained X amount of pounds on my mission. How do I lose this before I go home? I would really, really encourage mission leadership to not go there, to not
Hmm.
say, oh, just do this, just, here's what you should do to make that happen. And it seems harmless, right? It seems like, oh, what's the big deal? Well, do you want to kind of explore why that could be problematic, just to kind of make it make sense rather than just be advice that they have to take on a leap of faith, but instead kind of hit on more of the logical side?
Yeah, I love that point of, okay, so this missionary comes to me and says, not necessarily like I'm struggling with food, because that could be a thing, right? But the flip side of this, like I'm coming to you for advice. I'm struggling with what I feel like is not knowing what to eat or how to lose weight, and I need to do that before I go home. And I love that advice of not going there, like avoiding giving them that kind of advice. And I would say just to refocus, I think refocusing on the reason that they're there, the work that they're doing, their worth and value being outside of those things, I think are really good messages to be sending. But I think it gets really tricky to give nutrition and weight loss advice to anyone, missionary or not. All of us should really refrain from doing so because we just don't know. If you don't have the experience in working with individuals on food issues, it's very difficult to truly navigate that in the way it needs to be navigated. And I guess that's the way I would say it. And hopefully that hits home.
Yeah.
Um, that you don't know all the inner workings and the nuances and the stuff that comes up with food and weight concerns. There's a whole host of other aspects of these kinds of topics. It's never as simple, ever as simple as I just need to know what to eat or how to lose weight. As
Yeah.
much as it feels like it's black and white or that simple, it's not. So as you said, Paige, just don't go there. That's probably the best advice.
Yeah, and I just want to make the point too, just in addition to all the great things you've just said, is, things that people just throw around that seem like just common sense nutrition advice, it's actually not good advice a lot of times. So for example, saying something like just cut out the carbohydrate, or just limit your carbs. Well, how many carbs are they eating? Like do we even know already that they're getting, quote, too much? Like, so it's not exactly the context of what a person's actually doing is really, really important to in order to give nutrition advice. And then on top of that, just like the things we like to throw around, there is such a thing as not eating enough carbohydrate. There is such a thing as eating too much fiber. There is such a thing as not getting enough food, right? So if the advice is always eat less, exercise more, that's a lot of times really, really unhelpful and or really harmful advice. And then the other thing I want to say is and this is pretty countercultural. Maybe for someone who's new to this podcast, you're like, "Whoa, this is different." But truly, truly, you cannot look at a person and know how much they're eating, how their relationship with food is, whether or not they are, quote, healthy or engaging in healthy behaviors. So I would imagine that to a person who's maybe not so sensitive or not so trained in this area, if a missionary comes in and says, "Gosh, I've gained this weight," it's easy to assume, well, you're probably eating too much, but that's actually not always. It's not always the case, first of all, and it's not always helpful to just give more restrictive advice.
I love that. I love that reminder. And I think we all have to have that regular daily reminder of, I don't know someone's health based on how they look. I cannot judge that effectively. And I'd say, let's even flip to the other side, which is, let's say a mission president has a missionary who is showing a lot of, quote unquote, discipline around food and exercise. And I think culturally, in general, we could easily applaud that, right? We could applaud, oh, look how disciplined they are with food and exercise. But to me, that's a little bit of a red flag and something that I think warrants just sensitivity and attention rather than reinforcing, like, look how disciplined you are. Oh my gosh, you're doing that so great. Like, I would really encourage you not to give those kinds of compliments either. Like, I would just say in general, good rule of thumb is don't comment on food or weight in general, behaviors around those in general. And observe and be sensitive and use your discernment to identify like what truly is an issue here, and how can I best support this particular missionary in being the healthiest and happiest they can be.
Yeah, and any sort of like uh, times where the whole mission gets together and the mission president or someone on the leadership team wants to sort of kind of broadly talk about nutrition or exercise or sleep or some aspect of how the missionaries are caring for themselves. um, I would just echo so much of what you've already said as far as how to talk about that and what kind of language to use. I would encourage language like, how can you take care of yourself so that you feel your best and you have the energy that you need and you feel like you're ready to go for your day? Um, how do you support your own sense of self-care and self-compassion? And how do you live your values and what's important to you, rather than, everyone should be exercising more, everyone should be eating better, like, or quote unquote better. Or I've heard sometimes from clients that might not be said that exact way, but sometimes that's kind of the message they get, is that there's sort of this culture of sort of rigidity around food that sometimes can start from the top, and that's not always the case. But if we can kind of bring it back to what's really important and what really matters, and that's, you want to take care of yourself so that you can do what matters to you. If that's how you're framing your advice or conversation around self-care, I think that that's going to be a lot better than manipulation or punishment or judgment.
Oh, I love that advice. I love it so much. Like, I trust you to take care of your body. I'm going to encourage you to take care of yourself so that you can feel your best and do your best. And I trust you to know how to do that. Like, really putting that trust back in them. And I think that's inspiring to people. Really, I think oftentimes we think, people need to be told what to do. And I have found the opposite. Paige, I think you've probably too. In practice in general, I think people really thrive when they're like, yeah, okay, I can trust myself to take care of myself. I can check my intentions and recognize my goals. And yeah, I want to feel my best and do my best. And I can trust myself to be able to do that.
Yeah, I agree. I've seen that too. And that's even so you were talking about the importance of seeking professional help when needed. And, even when someone seeks our professional help, the work that we're doing there is really telling our clients, you are the expert of your own body. I'm here to help you weave in any aspects of how you might alter this way of thinking about it or incorporate this scientific principle or whatever. But really, we defer to our clients as the expert, even us who did a lot of training and have a lot of experience in the realm of nutrition.
Love it. And I will say, I've worked with, there's been a couple of cases where local mission leadership has reached out to me and said, I have this particular missionary that's struggling in this way. How can I support them? I've actually met with a missionary on a mission. I've offered advice to the mission president. There's been some potential young adults at missionary age that are thinking about serving a mission but have disordered relationships with food that I've helped. And I really value someone saying, okay, you know what? I get this. I'm taking you seriously. I understand that this is an issue and we're going to work through this together. And I'm going to reach out and see if there's things that I can get help on. Like, let us help you. I think that we're all aiming for this same goal of helping these missionaries just thrive. And I think there's ways to do that. So maybe it's not Paige or I, but maybe there are people local to you if this is, mission leadership that we're speaking to, that there's people close to you that could give you some great advice about how to navigate potential food and body image issues with the missionaries.
Love it. Okay, the last thing I want to say, as far as kind of just some thoughts directed toward more leadership role people. Um, Emily and I were talking about this before we started recording, but I want to emphasize it here that it's really important to recognize. So, in context of what Emily was saying earlier about how you validate these concerns, take them seriously, ask questions, try to understand what this is like for them. The reason that that's so important is because food issues are about the food and they aren't about the food at the same time. So it's easy to kind of say like, "Oh yeah, just eat," or "Oh, what's going on with you? Why are you struggling with that? Just take care of it. Just make this change." But it's important to know that many times whatever is going on kind of deeper and on a more sort of systemic level can kind of come out in a person's relationship with food. So it's as you might be hearing, having missionaries come to you with these concerns, it's really important to kind of have it in your head, like this is about the food, but it also isn't about the food.
Right. We know that eating disorders and eating disorder behaviors are functional in some way. We wouldn't use them. No one would use them if they weren't. They tend to be the way we cope with other things. And so I think that really highlights an important aspect of this, that eating disorder behaviors are about the food. And you said, Paige, they're not about the food at the same time. And it's very easy. If you haven't struggled with food and body image, I totally get it. It's a really hard dynamic to understand if you haven't really struggled with it yourself, or you're not in the trenches very often with these kinds of individuals. Totally understandable that this might feel really new and foreign and weird and awkward and maybe clunky at first. However, it's not just, well, just eat more, you'll be fine. It typically is a coping strategy for something much deeper. And so there is a lot of times deeper work to do in resolving disordered eating.
Yeah, definitely. All right, Emily, we've tried to talk about from the perspective of the missionary what to expect and what to really think about when it comes to food and body changes and things like that at this time of life. We've talked a little bit about what like leadership can maybe shift, or how to navigate those really tender times where a missionary might express a struggle that they're going through. What else are we missing though? I'm sensitive. Like, this is such a big topic. I'm like, oh, there's probably so much more we should say. But is there anything we haven't talked about that you really want to?
I just think it's interesting that Latter-day Saint doctrine does include what I feel like is really beautiful doctrine, which is we're sent to earth with a body to learn and grow through experience, particularly to become more like Jesus Christ. And I just don't see any part of that mission, or any part of that, experience on earth staying the same size. I just think we need to, what I would say to these missionaries going is to be clear about why you're going. What is the intention behind your choice, your own choice to serve in this way? Why is this important to you? That why is going to be so pivotal at helping you stay focused, helping you stay grounded, helping you stay connected to your own values of why this is important. And I really think that has the potential to make all the difference for anyone struggling with food in general, of really connecting to your values and why you're here, what your purpose is, what's important to you. Because I think that we live in a culture that can easily hijack our values, that can make us care about things that, in all honesty, we don't really care about. And food preoccupation and body image, there's a lot of layers to that. But I think having a clear vision for yourself and really staying connected to your values can make all the difference. So as maybe you're preparing to serve, or you have served, or you're preparing children for possible mission service, or you're a leader supporting these kids who are serving, I would just say there's a lot of value in connecting to values. And yeah, I think that's what I'd add.
Oh, I love that. And that's something all of us can work on. It's so helpful to get clear about what's important to me, where am I going, what am I trying to do, what matters, because when you can identify that, it's easy to kind of let some other things go that don't help you get there, or that don't align, or that don't really matter long term. And it's just so much easier to stay the course of what you're trying to do when you're clear on that, versus when you're feeling really remote from that. It's easy to kind of get distracted and kind of get discouraged. I mean, it's easy to get discouraged no matter what, but yeah, I think that does help, having that direction. Okay, well, Emily, thanks for talking about this with me. I really hope that this is supportive and helpful for anyone that has to do with this arena, and even others who are listening who kind of are just peeking in on this because they're interested. And I know for me, I love learning about different ways that people live in different cultural or religious practices. I think it's fascinating. So for anyone who's here who maybe is learning about missionaries and some of the inner workings for the first time, I hope you've enjoyed having a chance to kind of understand what these kids or young adults you see in your towns are going through, and maybe how you might just like smile at them. If nothing else, it means a lot. I know missions can be hard in so many ways, with body image, with food, with pressure. But also it can be hard just with rejection and people just constantly saying no. So even someone just lending a kind smile would mean a lot too.
Love it.
Okay, Emily, take a minute and talk about where people can find you and keep in touch with you and your work.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. You can find me online. My website is emilyfonsbeck.com. I'll spell it because if you don't know, you can't spell it. It's I can't even spell it. FONNESBECK. emilyfonsbeck.com. And I'm on most social media at emilyfonsbeck.RD. And I'd love to connect with you there.
Okay, thanks so much, Emily.
Thank you.
Well, I sincerely hope you've enjoyed this conversation. If you haven't already, please go ahead and leave a review on iTunes. Thanks again so much for listening, and we'll see you soon for another episode.